What's in your hand, now?
Officer, I'm standing still. My hands are visible. This is my key. I am not resisting.
I said drop it! Stop challenging
The key
me!
is on the ground. My hands are empty. Lower your weapon and tell me why I'm being detained.
Turn around! You're being detained right now!
Officer Kyle Brannigan, 27 years old and buzzing with adrenaline that had no place in a parking lot on a Tuesday afternoon, had his taser drawn and leveled at the chest of the older man. "I said get on the ground. Stop resisting," Brannigan yelled again, stepping closer, his boots crunching on the gravel. "I'm not resisting, officer," the man said. His voice was a deep, resonating baritone that carried authority without needing volume. "I am standing still. My hands are visible. I am holding the key to this unit. You are making a mistake." The man was Elias Thorne. At 64 years old, he had a spine of steel forged during 30 years in the United States Marine Corps. He was wearing a neatly pressed polo shirt tucked into khaki trousers and comfortable walking shoes. He looked exactly like what he was, a retiree running an errand. But Officer Brannigan didn't see a retired colonel. He didn't see a grandfather or a tax-paying citizen. He saw a black man standing in front of an open storage unit that Brannigan had decided, based on absolutely nothing, didn't belong to him. "Drop the object in your hand," Brannigan commanded. "It is a key," Elias stated, moving his hand slowly to show the silver brass. "It opens Unit B-14 right here, the unit I am currently standing in front of. Drop it." Elias slowly opened his fingers. The key fell to the concrete with a metallic tink. "The key is on the ground. My hands are empty. I am going to ask you again. Officer, to lower your weapon and tell me why I am being detained." This is the moment where everything could have been resolved. A seasoned officer would have looked at the situation, a well-dressed older man in broad daylight, a car parked nearby with valid tags, a key that clearly fit the lock, and realized there was no threat. But Brannigan wasn't looking for a resolution. He was looking for submission. And Elias Thorne wasn't the kind of man who submitted to tyranny, whether it was in a foreign desert or a Florida parking lot. Before we see how this absolute failure of police procedure escalates, I need you to take a second. Look at where you are right now. Are you safe? Now imagine if someone pointed a weapon at you while you were doing your weekend chores. It's a terrifying thought. If you believe that experience and dignity should be respected, go ahead and like this video. It helps us tell these stories. Officer Brannigan holstered his taser but immediately reached for his handcuffs. He closed the distance between them, grabbing Elias's wrist with forceful, unnecessary roughness. "Turn around. You're being detained for trespassing and disorderly conduct." "Trespassing?" Elias asked, his voice remaining calm even as his arm was twisted behind his back. "I rent this locker. My name is on the lease. The manager knows me. If you take 3 steps to the office, they will verify my identity." "You can tell it to the judge," Brannigan snapped. "Right now you're failing to comply with a lawful order to identify yourself." "You never asked for my identification," Elias corrected him. "You asked me to get on the ground. I refused to soil my clothes because I have committed no crime. Florida Statute 901.151 requires you to have a reasonable, articulable suspicion that I have committed, am committing, or am about to commit a crime. Standing in front of my own property is not a crime." Brannigan froze for a split second. The legal code citation caught him off guard. Most people just begged or yelled. This man was quoting statutes, but instead of pausing to think, Brannigan's ego took the wheel. He felt humiliated. He felt challenged. And in his mind, challenged authority had to be met with overwhelming force. "You're under arrest," Brannigan grunted, snapping the second cuff onto Elias's wrist. "For what?" Elias asked. "Resisting an officer without violence and trespassing." "I cannot trespass on property I lease, officer, and I cannot resist an arrest that lacks probable cause. You are violating my Fourth Amendment rights, and you are doing it on camera." Brannigan spun Elias around. "What camera?" Elias nodded toward the black sedan parked 2 spaces down. My dash cam is running. It has a wide-angle lens. It captured your arrival, your weapon draw, and your refusal to investigate before escalating. And the security camera up there," Elias tilted his head toward the corner of the building, "has the rest." Brannigan tightened his grip on Elias's arm. "Walk." They began the march to the patrol car. Elias Thorne, a man who had led battalions, who had held top-secret clearance, who had served his country while this officer was still in diapers, was being frog-marched across the asphalt like a common criminal. But Elias kept his head up. He knew the law. He knew his rights, and he knew that the young man pushing him forward had just destroyed his own life. He just didn't know it yet. As they reached the patrol car, a woman emerged from the rental office. She was in her late 50s, wearing the facility's uniform. She stopped dead in her tracks, her eyes going wide. Officer, what are you doing?" "That's Mr. Thorne." Brannigan didn't stop. "Back away, ma'am. This doesn't concern you." "He pays his rent 6 months in advance," she shouted, pulling out her phone. "He comes here every Tuesday. You're arresting one of our best customers." He refused to identify and was acting suspiciously. Brannigan lied, opening the back door of his cruiser. "Suspiciously?" the woman yelled, hitting the record button on her phone. "He was organizing his fishing tackle. I'm recording this. Mr. Thorne, I'm recording this." "Thank you, Mrs. Higgins," Elias said politely, as if he were greeting a neighbor at church rather than being shoved into a police vehicle. "Please ensure the footage is saved, and call my wife. Tell her I'll be late for dinner." "Get in." Brannigan shoved Elias down. The retired colonel had to duck awkwardly to fit his tall frame into the cramped back seat. The plastic seat was hard, and the air inside was stale, smelling of sweat and industrial cleaner. Brannigan slammed the door shut, cutting off the sound of Mrs. Higgins protesting. He walked around to the driver's side, glancing at the woman recording him. He gave her a glare that was meant to intimidate, but she didn't flinch. She just kept the camera trained on him. Brannigan got into the front seat, his heart rate finally starting to come down, replaced by a slow, creeping burn of irritation. He had wanted a bust. He had wanted to find a burglar. Instead, he had a stubborn old man who thought he knew the law. He picked up the radio microphone. "Dispatch 1 Adam 12, 1 in custody, trespassing, resisting without, en route to processing." "Copy 1 Adam 12. The dispatcher's voice crackled. Brannigan put the car in drive and pulled out of the facility. He glanced in the rearview mirror. Elias was sitting perfectly upright, staring out the window. He didn't look angry. He didn't look scared. He looked disappointed. "You know," Brannigan said, trying to regain the upper hand, "if you had just got on the ground like I told you, we could have sorted this out. You did this to yourself." Elias turned his gaze from the passing palm trees to the officer's eyes in the mirror. "Officer, I spent 30 years in the Marine Corps. I have been shot at in 3 different decades. I have followed orders that meant life or death. I know what a lawful order sounds like, and I know what a power trip looks like. You didn't investigate. You assumed, and your assumption was based on the fact that you didn't think a man who looks like me should be in a place like that." "Race has nothing to do with this," Brannigan shot back, too quickly. "It has everything to do with this," Elias said calmly. "If I were a white man in a polo shirt with a key in my hand, would you have drawn your taser? Would you have screamed first and asked questions later?" Brannigan didn't answer. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. "You have a chance to fix this," Elias continued. "Turn around. Take me back to my car. Unarrest me. Apologize. I might still file a complaint, but it won't be a lawsuit. If you take me to that station, if you book me, you are sealing your fate." "I'm not unarresting you," Brannigan scoffed. "You think you can talk your way out of this? You're going to jail." "Very well," Elias said, leaning back against the uncomfortable seat. "Then we will do it the hard way." The rest of the drive passed in silence. Brannigan turned up the radio to drown out the quiet, but the silence from the back seat felt heavier than any noise. It was the silence of a storm gathering. Elias wasn't just sitting there. He was memorizing. He was noting the time of day, the speed of the vehicle, the route taken, the officer's badge number, which he had glimpsed earlier. He was building his case file in his mind. When they arrived at the precinct, Brannigan pulled into the Sallyport. He felt a sense of relief. He was on home turf now. The system would back him up. It always did. He got out and hauled Elias from the back seat. "Let's go. Watch your head," Brannigan said roughly, guiding him toward the booking intake. They walked through the heavy steel doors into the processing area. It was a busy afternoon. Several other officers were processing arrests. The air smelled of floor wax and old coffee. Behind the high desk sat Sergeant Miller. Miller was 55, with graying temples and eyes that had seen every lie and every truth the city had to offer. He was eating a sandwich and looking at a roster when Brannigan approached with Elias. Miller looked up. He saw Brannigan flushed and agitated. Then he looked at Elias. He saw the posture. He saw the calm. He saw the quality of the clothes and the lack of fear. Miller stopped chewing. "What you got, Brannigan?" Miller asked, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "Trespassing. Resisting without violence. Disorderly," Brannigan recited. "Caught him at the storage units on 4th. Wouldn't identify, wouldn't get on the ground." Miller looked at Elias. "That true?" "I identified myself as the renter of the unit," Elias said. "I had the key in my hand. I offered to show him the lease. He drew his taser instead." Miller's eyebrows went up. He looked back at Brannigan. "He had a key. He dropped it when I told him to." Brannigan stammered. "But he wouldn't get on the ground. He was being belligerent." "Belligerent?" Miller repeated flatly. He pointed to the counter. "Empty his pockets." Brannigan began the search. He pulled out a handkerchief, a set of car keys for a Mercedes-Benz, a pack of gum, and a slim leather wallet. He tossed them on the counter. Miller picked up the wallet. He opened it. The first thing he saw was the driver's license. Elias James Thorne, address in the wealthy gated community of Royal Palm Estates. Miller frowned. He flipped the flap of the wallet. There, behind a clear plastic window, was a Department of Defense identification card. Retired. Rank Colonel, United States Marine Corps. Behind that was a folded card, slightly worn, a Veterans Administration card identifying a service-connected disability rating. Miller stared at the ID. He looked at the face in the photo, then at the man standing in cuffs. He looked at the rank again. Colonel. That wasn't just an officer. That was a man who commanded regiments. A man who sat in rooms with generals and congressmen. Miller slowly closed the wallet and placed it gently on the counter. He didn't look at Brannigan. He looked at Elias. "Colonel Thorne," Miller said, his voice changing tone completely. "I served in the Army. 1st Infantry. I know what that ID means." "Thank you for your service, Sergeant," Elias said. Miller turned his gaze to Brannigan. It wasn't a friendly look. It was the look of a man who realizes his subordinate has just stepped on a landmine and is asking for a shovel to dig deeper. "Brannigan," Miller said quietly. "Did you run his name before you brought him in?" He wouldn't give me his ID, I told you." "Did you run the plates of the car he was standing next to?" I didn't have time. He was escalating." "Escalating," Miller repeated. He typed Elias's name into the computer system. He hit enter. The screen filled with data. No criminal record. Concealed carry permit holder. High-level security clearance flagged from his military service. Community board member. Miller sighed a long, deep exhale. "Take the cuffs off him." "Sarge." Brannigan blinked. "He's under arrest. I've already called it in." "I said, take the cuffs off him," Miller barked, startling the other officers in the room. "Now." Brannigan fumbled for his keys. His hands were shaking slightly. He unlocked the cuffs. Elias rubbed his wrists where the metal had dug into his skin. He didn't say a word. "Colonel," Miller said, standing up, "I'm going to need you to wait in the captain's office. Can I get you some water, coffee?" "Water would be fine," Elias said. "And I want my phone. I need to call my attorney." "You can use the office line," Miller said. "Brannigan give him his phone and his wallet." Brannigan handed the items back, looking confused and defensive. "Sarge, I followed protocol." He was resisting. Miller walked around the desk. He leaned in close to Brannigan, his voice a low growl. "You arrested a retired Marine colonel for standing at his own storage locker. You didn't verify ownership. You didn't run tags. You just saw a black man and decided he didn't belong. Do you have any idea what kind of storm is about to rain down on us?" "I didn't know who he was," Brannigan whispered. "That," Miller said, pointing a finger at Brannigan's chest, "is exactly the problem. You didn't care to find out. Get in the watch commander's office, now." While Brannigan was getting the dressing down of a lifetime, Elias sat in the glass-walled office of Captain Robert Henderson. He sipped the water he had been given. He watched the activity in the station. He saw the nervous glances the other officers were casting his way. They knew. News travels fast in a precinct. 20 minutes later, Captain Henderson walked in. He was a tall man looking tired. He had clearly just been briefed by Miller. "Mr. Thorne," Henderson said, extending a hand. Elias didn't take it. Henderson awkwardly lowered his hand. "I'm Captain Henderson. I've reviewed the preliminary report from Sergeant Miller." "It's Colonel Thorne," Elias corrected him gently. "My apologies. Colonel Thorne. Look, it seems there has been a significant misunderstanding. Officer Brannigan, he's zealous. He made a judgment call that in hindsight was incorrect." "It wasn't a misunderstanding, Captain," Elias said. "It was a civil rights violation. It was an unlawful detention. And it was an arrest without probable cause." "I understand you're upset," Henderson said, trying to use his soothing voice. "We're going to release you immediately. No charges will be filed. We'll wipe the arrest record. It'll be like it never happened. You can walk out of here right now." Elias looked at the captain. He saw the desperation. They wanted this to go away. They wanted him to be grateful for his freedom and go home. "No," Elias said. Henderson blinked. "Excuse me. I said no. You don't get to just say oops and send me on my way. I was handcuffed. I was placed in a patrol car. I was booked. That happened. You can't unring that bell." "Colonel, we're offering to drop everything." "I want the paperwork," Elias said firmly. "I want the arrest report. I want the booking sheet. I want the body camera footage preserved immediately. And I want Officer Brannigan's badge number and full name written down for me." "Colonel, if we go down that road—" "We are already down that road, Captain. I didn't choose this road. Your officer dragged me onto it. Now we are going to walk it to the end." Henderson sighed. He knew when he was beaten. "I'll get the paperwork started." By the time Elias left the station, 3 hours had passed. He walked out the front doors, his paperwork in a manila envelope tucked under his arm. He didn't call an Uber. He called his wife, Sarah. She arrived 20 minutes later in their Mercedes. When he got in the car, Sarah looked at him, tears in her eyes. She touched his wrist where the red marks from the handcuffs were still visible. "Did they hurt you?" she whispered. "Only my pride," Elias said. "And they're going to pay for that." That night, Mrs. Higgins uploaded her video to Facebook. She titled it, "Police Arrest 64-year-old Veteran for Cleaning His Storage Locker." By the time Elias woke up the next morning, the video had 50,000 views. By lunch, it had 1 million. The image of the calm, dignified black man standing still while the young, aggressive white officer screamed at him struck a nerve across the country. The comments section was on fire. "I'm a white guy, and if I did that, the cop would have just chatted with me," one user wrote. Another commented, "The discipline of that man, he didn't flinch." But the real explosion happened when the identity of the suspect was revealed. The local news picked up the story. Retired Marine Colonel arrested in storage unit mix-up. By Friday, Elias had a legal team. Not just a lawyer, but a team. The NAACP reached out. The ACLU reached out. But Elias chose a private firm that specialized in police misconduct. They filed the lawsuit on Monday morning. The complaint was brutal in its precision. It didn't just allege unlawful arrest. It alleged a pattern of racial profiling. It demanded not just damages, but the release of Brannigan's disciplinary record. The city tried to fight it. They claimed qualified immunity. They claimed Brannigan had acted in good faith. But the video didn't lie. And then the discovery phase began. Elias's lawyers got access to Brannigan's history. It was a gold mine of bias. In his 4 years on the force, Brannigan had stopped black drivers at 3 times the rate of white drivers. He had used force in 40% of those stops. He had complaints for rudeness, for aggression, for unlawful searches. All of them had been dismissed by Internal Affairs as unfounded. But they couldn't dismiss this one. Not with the colonel, not with the video. The deposition of Officer Brannigan was the turning point. Elias sat across the table watching the young man squirm. Under oath, Brannigan fell apart. "Why did you think he was trespassing?" the lawyer asked. He looked suspicious." "What specifically was suspicious? Was he breaking a lock?" "No." "Was he looking into other units?" "No." "So a black man standing still is suspicious to you?" Brannigan remained silent. "Answer the question, officer." I made a mistake." "You made a choice." Elias spoke up for the first time. The room went silent. "You chose to see a criminal instead of a citizen." The city settled 2 weeks later. They couldn't risk a jury trial. They knew a jury would look at Elias Thorne, a man who had served his country with honor, and then look at Kyle Brannigan, and they would hand Elias a blank check. The settlement was for $1.1 million. It was one of the largest individual payouts for a wrongful arrest in the city's history. But the money wasn't the end of it. As part of the settlement, Elias demanded a public apology from the chief of police. He demanded that Brannigan be terminated, not allowed to resign, but fired. And he demanded that the department implement a new training program on implicit bias led by outside experts. The chief of police stood at a podium a month later. "We failed Colonel Thorne," he said to the gathered press, "and in doing so, we failed our community." Kyle Brannigan was fired. The police union tried to appeal, but the public pressure was too great. The video had been seen by 20 million people worldwide. He was toxic. He would never wear a badge again. Elias Thorne stood in his living room looking at the check for $1.1 million. It was a life-changing amount of money for most people. For Elias, it was blood money. It was paid for with his dignity. He didn't keep a dime. He set up the Thorne Legal Defense Fund. Its mission was simple: to provide top-tier legal representation for veterans of color who were victims of police misconduct. "I had the resources to fight," Elias told a reporter in his only interview after the settlement. "I had the rank. I had the knowledge. But what about the private who just got home? What about the guy who served 4 years and is working 2 jobs? They deserve justice too." The story of Elias Thorne isn't just about a bad cop. It's about the system that allowed that cop to operate that way for 4 years unchecked. It's about the assumptions we make when we see someone. Elias returned to his storage unit a few weeks later. Mrs. Higgins was there. She came out and hugged him. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Thorne," she said. "Don't be." Elias smiled. "You recorded the truth. That's all that matters." He opened his locker. His fishing gear was exactly where he had left it. The sun was shining. He took his tackle box, walked to his car, and drove to the pier. He sat there for hours watching the waves, a free man, a vindicated man, but a man who would never look at a police cruiser the same way again. Before you go, I want you to ask yourself a hard question. If there had been no video, and if Elias had been a janitor instead of a colonel, would justice have been served? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. This story is a reminder that rights are like muscles. If you don't exercise them, they atrophy. And sometimes you have to stand your ground even when the world is screaming at you to get down. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, please share it. Education is the only way we change things. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of accountability and justice. See you in the next one.